This is ChangeMakers with Katie Gore, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
This week's changemaker is Bob Simpson, the founder of Simpson Impact Strategies and CEO of the Multifamily Impact Council, a nonprofit dedicated to advancing impact investing principles in the multifamily housing industry. With over 25 years of experience in affordable housing, Bob is a nationally recognized leader who has shaped housing finance and policy, including his 20-year tenure at Fannie Mae, where he pioneered innovative financing solutions. Bob, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's great to have you here. I am eager to hear the multifamily side of things, and I really appreciate you taking the time here. You've had such an extensive career in housing finance, housing policy, operations, quite a menu, if you will, during your time. Let's start off talking about the Multifamily Impact Council. If you don't mind, tell us what it is and what it does. Just give us all the details.
Sure. So the Multifamily Impact Council is a nonprofit membership organization, and we founded the organization to help establish industry standards around impact investing in the multifamily space, so that we could increase the flow of private capital to support more affordable and sustainable housing, and do it in a way that improves lives, strengthens communities, and also delivers strong financial returns. That's the primary goal of the organization. We've put out a multifamily impact framework, which are those industry standards and principles that we now maintain. They've been downloaded by more than 360 organizations across the multifamily sector in the last year and a half. Folks who are using that to build into their strategies and their due diligence and their product development measures. So really happy about that. We spend a lot of time building an ecosystem and a platform where multifamily owners, operators, investors, service providers can share information and best practices so that they can learn from each other, develop partnerships, and do more. And then we also work a lot with our partners and research institutions around the country to be able to take our metrics and the kind of the impact initiatives that people are doing, and really help quantify, the financial value of doing good. And that's really, geared towards, really so we can help tell the story that, if you're really looking to make a good investment in commercial real estate and you want to make an impact, and you also want to, meet your fiduciary responsibilities, we think multifamily impact investing is a really good place to start.
One metric that I hear a lot is the need. I've heard estimates of like 4.3 million brand new apartments or are needed. And what is the landscape as far as the need? Is that what you're hearing as far as volume, or what are the headwinds as far as the need?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. I mean, clearly, whether it's 7 million or 4 million or 2 million, if you're a family and you're waiting and you're stuck on the waiting list for an affordable housing unit in your community, the only number that really matters is one, and that's
Mhm.
you.
Yeah.
So, I think once you get past I think every estimate will tell you that we need at least 2 million units. And so I kind of don't count after that. I just think we need to build more units.
Yeah.
I mean, the headwinds are, affordable housing, multifamily housing in general is complex, but it can be boiled down to some very simple things, and that's where you see some of the challenges. I mean, number one, it costs more to build today than it did 5 years ago. It also, in order to make a property cash flow and make it viable as an investment, you have to be able to collect enough in rental revenue to justify the cost of building. And in order to offset that, subsidies are needed at some level for a lot of properties. And it could be a federal low-income housing tax credit. It could be project-based Section 8. But there's a lot of other things that we see going on in state and local governments who are looking to really leverage more investment in their space through property tax abatements, tax exempt bond financing. So that's one of the challenges. I think we've also created a system that's become extremely time. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of complexity to figure out affordable housing. I'm not sure we need that. I don't. It takes far too long to get housing projects approved at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. That adds cost, and so that's also a big challenge. And there are ways in which we can streamline that, and we try to identify some of the best ways to do it, so that we think that the state and local governments are always looking to maximize taxpayer dollars and make sure they're spending it the most efficient way possible, and also doing it in a way, hopefully, that can bridge private capital to come in. And so really, the regulatory issue is a big one as well, but they all drive up cost.
Hmm. Are the private investors, are they seeing the barriers and the risks louder, bigger, scarier now? Or, is it, just the same kind of barriers you mentioned, the time, the cost, the ability to, the complexity, the ability to leverage some of those private components. I mean, like, give us a perspective from the private investors piece of this.
I think from a cost perspective, everyone sees the same thing and it's cyclical, right? We saw a ton of building, new construction starts, and now you're seeing those being completed now in the multifamily sector in a lot of key markets. Those deals were started 3 years ago. They're being completed today, and you're seeing rent growth, really stabilize in those markets. And then, you reach a period of time now where it costs more, and so you're gonna see less building without, any additional subsidy coming in. I think what we've seen is I don't think that barriers are any more or less challenging. I think because we've seen an influx of private capital and new investors come into this space,
Mhm.
they're noticing it more.
Oh,
Uh, and so, if you're an investor who's used to doing a traditional, conventional market rate deal that does not have affordability restrictions put in, you're used to a certain time frame to go get your deal approved. And now all of a sudden you're working through, income certification, state and local programs, um, uh, getting public input and approval, all of these things, and you're looking at this and saying, okay, how come it's taking me 6, 7, 8 months longer, and how come it's costing me more per unit to do this deal that's affordable versus market rate? So I actually think it's a great perspective, because I think in the affordable space, a lot of folks who are used to this just get used to
yeah.
the stuff you have to do, and so I think actually, the lack of patience is a good thing. The willingness to look at things from a new perspective is a good thing. So it's good to get some new blood, some new perspective into the industry and in the affordable housing world. And so that's what I think we're seeing. Uh,
Mhm.
I don't think the problems have gotten any worse. I think that the demand has gotten higher, right? So the supply issue has gotten
Mhm.
worse.
Yeah.
But that's, yeah.
Mhm. A lot of people want to build our way out of this, but then the realists come in and say, we can't build fast enough. What is a more realistic way to try to curb some of that um, graph that shows the demand has outpaced supply? What is the council, Multifamily Impact Council, saying, or what is it that you guys are strategizing as a way to break that down?
I think the first thing we always say is there is no one solution, right? I mean, if you look everywhere you read today about affordable housing, you'll see the headline, subject X is the solution to affordable housing, right? Whether it's repurposing shipping containers, whether
Mhm.
it's ADUs, you name it.
Yeah.
That binary way of thinking is really not productive. And so you really have to say, we have to take a multi-tiered approach. Um, You want to be able to build units at the lowest possible price point that allow you to make rents affordable to the highest amount of people. You
Right.
can do that in a number of ways. In some markets, that may mean it makes the most effective use of your dollars to build something from the ground up. It may include factory built homes. It may include modular
Mhm.
homes. All of that's a great part of it. None of them are the total solution. There's also a really strong case to be made that you have to preserve the existing supply that you have.
Mhm.
And so making sure that we're, that the properties that are affordable today remain affordable tomorrow is also very important. There's also a lot of markets where you're seeing significant growth in the number of property owners who are coming in and buying market rate properties that are a little older, and then working with the state and local governments to place rent restrictions on those units so that you're converting units to affordable. So there are a lot of units in the country. We clearly need new supply and we clearly need to build more. But when someone says that we have a 7 million unit shortfall of affordable housing, you know, they're not, it's not as if there are 7 million people out there who don't have an apartment. They
Mhm.
do have an apartment, they're just paying too much.
Mhm.
And so, how do you then take some of the existing affordable units as they go through the for sale process in the markets where it works, in the properties where it works, and put affordable restrictions on it? So, on the one hand, you can get lost in the complexity because there's so many different ways to address this. I always just think, how can you make the most efficient use of the resources you have available to buy and improve or build a property at a price point that allows you to make it affordable to people who rent it. That's the way you do it, and any option works.
Yeah. You mentioned rent control. It's very controversial. Some communities are really pushing for it on the ground floor level. Other communities have said, hey, we tried it. It drove up costs. It scared off developers. Uh, w I'm sure it's probably a little of both if we were being honest here, and it differs from community to community based on what the need is, right? What is your take and what you're seeing, in the rent control? What is the council, official response on that?
Yeah, I mean, the way we look at it is, you know, if you really want to create more affordable housing, right? The concept of rent control on paper sounds great.
Mhm.
It makes you feel good. The reality is that when you place those artificial restrictions in the market, it really has two big effects in the market. I mean, number one, it makes it really, really hard for property owners to reinvest in the properties, especially vacant units. And that's something that you really have to think about.
Yeah.
And the second thing is it makes it harder for private capital to come in. Even if the rent control limit is, let's say, 20%, rent growth, you can't increase rents by 20%. Sounds reasonable. But
Mhm.
as an investor, all of a sudden there's an additional layer of questions to say, okay, well, this law is on the books. It makes sense today. What if the next city council puts it down to 2%? And all of a sudden I have to go tell my investors, many of whom may be teachers and retirees on pensions, that, oh, by the way, this investment isn't working anymore. So you add that in, it just makes it more likely that they're going to invest somewhere else. There's a better way to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can put rent restrictions on units in return for the subsidies that you're putting out. If you restrict, if there's a property and you're doing a property tax abatement and you say, look, I want half of these units to be affordable to low and moderate income households, uh, the rent will at that point, if you set it to that level, rents will only go up if incomes go up. And that's a much better form of solving for the affordability issue in a manner that the market is familiar with and that they already know how to underwrite and they already know how to assess the risk, and as opposed to just a straight up rent control policy. So uh,
Mhm.
good intentions, really bad execution.
Yeah. And in that example you gave, it also provides some consistency and some predictability, which of course, is what the investors and the builders and they like. So, speaking on that side of the investors, I noticed that you guys are creating a standardized approach, or that's kind of one of the your goals is to have this standardized approach to impacting investing in affordable housing and housing. What exactly does that mean for the practitioners or communities? What's that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's really what we always say is that if you're going to, you know, do impact investing in multifamily and you want to consider yourself an impact fund or an impact investor, you really have to first answer three what I would call very fundamental questions. And the first is the investment that I'm making, is it improving the life of the person who lives in the property? Right? Are they able to get more housing stability? Are they able to build their financial health? Is the property going to be well maintained and safe? And are they going to be paying affordable rents? You have to be able to
Mhm,
say that, and you have to be able to
mhm,
prove it. The second is, are you building or renovating that property in a way that makes that property safer and more resilient to weather events, and in a way that conserves energy and water and other precious natural resources? And the third is, does the investment allow you to meet your fiduciary responsibility
okay.
to your investors? So it has to make money. Um, I always say the most impactful thing a teacher's pension fund can do is make sure that the teacher who has that pension gets paid every month. It's very important. And it just so happens that you can do all three of those. And that's the way we think about it, is like, you have to keep those three things in mind. They don't fight with each other. We think it's like, financial returns and impact is like peanut butter and chocolate. They go really well together. And our goal is to help make sure people understand how that works and why,
Mhm,
and then how to
mhm.
do it.
And that standardized approach really can materialize for more units that are affordable, that are improving people's lives. So, the community is going to benefit when you guys can rally the investors around those three principles, right?
Yeah, and it's also just making sure everyone's speaking the same language.
Mhm.
That's how you get to scale, right? And so, if you were thinking about this from an investor perspective and you want to understand, okay, this person says they're driving, creating more housing stability, what does that mean, right? Does that mean a couple flashy pictures on their impact report and a couple anecdotes, or does it mean that your vacancy rates are going down, that your turnover costs are going down, that lengths of stay are going up, that people are paying more rent on time, or your bad debt costs are going down? That's a real indicator of housing stability and financial health. In terms of, the living environment, how often are you doing property inspections? What's your CapEx? Are you keeping your CapEx budget funded? All of those sort of things are very tangible, and those are things that you need to look at as an investor, and they're very directly correlated to impact.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, this is the part of the podcast where I ask you to get out your crystal ball here. Um, I want to talk about policy. What policies do you see on the horizon that are going to impact both the investors and the communities and what you guys are doing here? Do you have priorities that you're watching, policies that you're watching? Speak to we mentioned earlier headwinds. Speak to headwinds that are out there right now for us to navigate in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first, policy issue we're really looking at and following is all of the work that's being done at the state and local level right now to really incentivize the preservation and creation of more affordable housing. I think there's a lot of amazing things going on with state and local governments. And so the more that we can help um, provide guidance and feedback on, property tax abatement programs that can help people preserve units and create more units that are affordable, being able to make use of your tax exempt bond authority to put out lower cost financing, ways in which you can really rethink the regulatory process to make sure that those deals get done quicker, but also more in a more cost effective manner. I think that's a really big part is what's going on at the state and local level. As it relates to the federal side, I think there's a lot of opportunities around regulatory streamlining today. And especially if it's done in a way that's thoughtful and really, tries to achieve the objective is, are we making sure these homes are safe, that consumers are being protected, but really making sure that we're taking a close look at regulations that may not be having the consequences that we initially thought they would have.
Right.
Right. So, you know, uh, I think some of the environmental protection laws that were passed in the early 70s, uh, that's probably, there's ways in which you could streamline that. There's ways in which you could create an exemption process for affordable housing. I think there's a tremendous opportunity on the regulatory streamlining piece. And obviously, every time there's a tax bill, you want to see more tax credits. I think that would be great. I think one of the challenges with the low income housing tax credit program today is that there have been so many other tax credit programs since then that really took all the lessons learned from the low income housing tax credit, and they improved their structure so that
Yeah.
those tax credits, like in the solar space and the green space, are actually more competitive and more attractive to investors today than low income housing tax credits. So it'd be nice to figure out if we're going to increase the allocation that we could make that the credit itself more competitive in the market because
Mhm.
we want to make sure that it's competitive in the market.
Mhm. Are you allowed to brag about communities or that, name them out that you say, "Hey, they're on it. They've done a great job. They've got the right blend. They've got the right momentum. They're growing. They've got their zoning in order." Are you allowed to call any of them out for
Oh
best
yeah.
practices?
The nice thing is I don't have a filter, I say whatever comes to mind. But
Great. Let's hear
yeah,
'em. We wanna hear 'em.
well, there's a couple places. I mean, like, for instance, I think that the city of Dallas, Texas, is doing a
Okay.
really nice job in terms of, putting together a housing finance corporation that is able to like
Mhm.
provide tax breaks, do tax exempt bond financing to really help ensure that you can convert existing market rate deals to affordable. I think they've been very good about, using their taxpayer dollars in a really smart way to get private investment in. I think Minneapolis has done a really nice job around
Okay.
zoning. And they've also done a really nice job of how they think about rent restrictions versus rent control.
Okay.
And so I think they're doing a really great job. So there's a lot of communities like that out there. Um, every day you see someone new. Oftentimes what you read about are the folks that aren't doing it right.
Right.
But there's a
Uh,
lot of communities out there that are doing a really nice job. I think Los Angeles has done. Obviously, they've had a significant number of challenges, which is to be expected when you have a large, a community of 20 million people. But I think they've done a nice job over the last couple of years of really prioritizing affordable housing, looking for ways to streamline that approval process. They
mhm.
still have a long way to go, but I think they're doing a really nice job. So I think there's a lot of communities out there. Austin's done a great job
Okay.
in the same way. So you could go to about any place in the country, and someone's doing something right. You
Okay.
just need to. You, the challenge for a lot of communities today is everyone wants to do their own. Everyone wants to be unique, right? And so it's really thinking about like what works everywhere.
Yeah.
What's always going to be true, right? Property tax abatement is a property tax abatement. Your mill levy may be different. The amount of your property tax may be different,
Right.
but it's all the same. And what you
Mhm.
really want to say is like, well, how many units do I need? What's the best way to use that? What's the best way to forego that tax revenue to build more units that eventually down the road will end up increasing tax revenue?
You've also seen cities like Columbus, Indianapolis, Phoenix, Miami, their rents in the last 5 years have completely changed, prior to what they were previously. Do you see a lot of other cities embracing multifamily housing differently now, given their own need and their supply dynamics?
Yeah, I think they're starting to. I think that, you're always going to have neighborhood battles.
Hmm.
Um, I think that, um, change is hard, but I think you are starting to see it. And I think one of the reasons people are saying it is because, um, it's getting very hard to live in some of these communities.
Hmm.
And I think so maybe less, I think that you can make the case that a multifamily development in a single family neighborhood isn't going to have a positive or negative effect
Hmm.
on housing values in that area. Um, if you want to live in a city that's vibrant and growing, traffic is there's always going to be issues with growth.
Hmm.
So that's one thing. The issue really is, how do you think about policies like parking? Um, how do you think about creating a vibrant downtown? How do you ensure that young folks who want to come to a community and get started and become a part of the housing continuum, have a place to rent so that someday they can own? I think those are all the things that are much more important. It's just recognizing that multifamily and single family rentals are a part of the housing continuum,
Yeah.
and that, not everyone, I don't know hardly anyone who ends up that the first home they're buying being the home they're going to live in for the rest of their life. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Maybe our grandparents,
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
generation, maybe.
Actually, maybe
Yeah.
my mom and dad. So, yeah.
Yeah. But one of the things about myths, about non-truths about multifamily, you hear crime. It doesn't fit in. There'll be too much traffic. Can you speak to debunk some of those myths about multifamily, either theoretically or through some analysis that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think the analysis is pretty clear. I mean, in some areas where you see high crime,
Mhm.
it's not high crime because there's a lot of multifamily there. There's a lot of multifamily there because, the zoning has been so exclusive to the areas where there's been a lot of economic
Mhm.
growth. And so, yeah, of course, that's sort of it's kind of the opposite, right? And I think that's the way it is in a lot of larger cities. I think obviously, yeah, there were some pretty, a lot of the policies in the 70s
Mhm.
around really concentrating poverty. I
Yep.
think that created a lot of problems, and
Mhm.
so you could look to that and say, oh, well, then multifamily housing must mean more crime. Or you could say, hey, we're human beings. We learn from our mistakes and we haven't done that again. Right.
Mhm.
The focus on developing mixed income apartments where you have a wide mix of incomes, making sure that, you're creating more opportunities for people of low and moderate income to live in good school districts. Those are all things that are firmly ingrained in our policy mentality today. And so, if you think that we never learn from our mistakes, then I think that thesis holds true. But,
Mhm.
that's, I don't know what reality it is, but it's not mine. So that's what I think about crime. I think that in terms of, sure, it changes the way your neighborhood is. Of
Mhm.
course it does. I think the question is, do you want to make sure that the people who live in your community and work in your, can afford to pay groceries, right? And can afford to buy your home when you move, and can, contribute to the economy. And do you want to make sure that they're going to be able to be financially stable enough to not have to, rely on the social service safety net that we have in place, or that the folks who work downtown don't have to live 30 miles away. That
Mhm.
seems to be much more important. But, it's, yeah, of course, the character of your neighborhood is going to change. I think it'll change for the better.
Yeah.
But that's what, I don't know. That's what growing means. So,
Mhm. And there's so many beautiful ways to design buildings that can be reflective of the community. It doesn't have to be the concrete thumb like it was in the 60s and the 70s either.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I hope I'm not around for when that architectural style comes back. But yeah, I mean, some of the things they're doing around building today, whether it's duplexes, garden style apartments, even high rises, you're seeing some beautiful buildings for mixed income housing.
Mhm,
What you're seeing in the manufactured and modular home space today,
mhm,
they're just wonderful looking buildings. And so I think sometimes we get hung up on those things, and sometimes you really do need to take a deep breath and say, okay, what's really the issue here? And from an affordable housing perspective, it's like if I'm owning a business in my community, I want to make sure that there are more people living in my community who have residual income to spend money at my business.
mhm,
And the best way to do that is to make sure that they're not paying 50% of their income on rent.
right.
Um, and so is that a good trade-off for, not having every single house in my neighborhood look like a single family house?
Right.
Sure. I mean, you look at a lot of I would say that in a lot of neighborhoods, most single family homes look the same.
Mhm.
So, you know, I, I,
Yeah.
I think that's my perspective is I think we should focus more on making sure that people have the ability to make a living
Mhm.
and give back to the community.
Mhm. One of the things I've said is that affordable housing policy is good economic policy. What is your take? Because you're dealing with the private sector and investors, you're really, really in the thick of that. What would be your take on how affordable housing is good economic policy?
Yeah, I think it makes economic sense. I mean, the data is very clear. When I was at Fannie Mae, we saw this all the time. Our affordable housing book of business always performed, from a credit perspective, it always performed better than the market rate book. It was less risky. It definitely performed differently. And so, if you think of like a low risk, uh, stable cash flow investment, where you're not going to see the peaks in terms of your returns, but you're also not
Mhm.
going to see the valleys. That's affordable housing. You're
Yeah.
getting a consistent, stable cash flow, lower risk. There's always demand. You always have higher occupancies. It's a really good
Mhm.
low risk investment. You're not going to see the upside that you might get if you time the market right on a market rate deal, but you always know what you're going to get. So we think it presents itself very well somewhere between a fixed income investment and a core plus investment. So
Mhm.
if you're thinking about an allocation, it's a really good stable asset to have that will generate a good dividend and appreciate in value over time. So I think that's good. I think the policy side um, is very clear, and it's something that we continue to really focus on. Is that you're going to get stable NOI growth.
Mhm.
You're going to have consistently better than market credit performance. And so if you're looking for that, if there's a place in your portfolio for that, then that's a good investment. It's not going to be 100% of your portfolio, but it
Mhm.
shouldn't be. And so we
Right.
think it's just a good option.
Mhm. We've covered a lot of things. Is there anything we've missed that you want to bring up before we close out?
In the environment we're living in today, always keeping in front of mind that housing policy and investments in affordable housing, we always need to keep the main thing. And that is that we need to ensure that more people have access to affordable rental housing units than they had before. And, we talked about why that's important. And so I think we can get lost in a lot of other issues. And a lot of times we try to use housing policy to solve every other problem that we have in the world. And I think that it's always a good time to step back and say, you know what, if we just created more affordable housing, a lot of those things will take care of themselves, right? And so if we just make sure that that person, has 50 more bucks in their bank account at the end of the month than they did before because they're paying less in rent, uh, that's going to have a tangible impact on their life, far more than any esoteric policy victory that we might have scored in Washington D.C.
Right. Well, when you talk about it's hard to come up with an emergency fund, It's hard to pay down credit card debt. It's hard to get a vehicle improvement to, commute, when you're paying 50% of your income on rent. And so, these are core fundamental desires for people to have a place that, they can have some economic mobility. So you're hitting the core of every individual, aren't you? Mhm.
Yeah, and it's like, do you want we wanna make sure that more people who live in our communities are able to go to their savings and loan or their bank, to get a loan, and
Yep.
that they don't have to go to a payday loan or a
Yep.
title loan shop
Right.
or sell their plasma,
Yeah.
um, y we don't we should be trying to find ways to get extractive capital out of our neighborhoods, and I think the best way to do that is to start where people live. And that's why, the rental housing place is a great place to start. You should be able to get when you pay rent on time, there's no reason why you should be able to build a credit score.
Right.
And now you can.
Now you can.
There's no reason why you shouldn't have the opportunity to save money,
Mhm.
or find ways in which you can take your kids to daycare. I mean, there are people who run daycare centers who depend on folks being able to pay them every month for services, and so ensuring that you have the residual income to do so, that just makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not a there's no it's not
Right.
a political argument. There's nothing about that that
Right.
doesn't just simply make sense.
Right.
And it also happens to be a really good thing to do.
Mhm. I mean, some of the cities you can't, their EMTs can't even afford to have a basic rent, in those cities. So, I mean, we're talking about a wide spectrum of people who are employed, but still not able to afford the going rent.
Yeah, and if you take that one step deeper, right? And so if you are in that community and you see that issue, right?
Mm.
Um, and you think about how much does it cost to build in this community? And let's say it takes a year and a half to get through the application process from neighborhood approval, environmental regulations, making sure that you're compliant. And maybe some of these regulations are already accounted for in building codes.
Mhm.
That's true in a lot of areas. So that adds cost. And then you add on to that, the fact that you may be subject to lawsuits from NIMBY groups, and that you all by then, if it costs more to build an affordable unit in town versus 40 miles outside of town, you have to ask yourself why. And if the regulations that you have are doing that, and you want the EMT to live in your community, I think today, oftentimes, I'm generalizing society. The urge is to write a very angry post on social media about it, right?
Yeah.
And the answer is to stop doing that, and do something.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself if you have created more housing or not, and it's either yes or no,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
there's no excuses. There should be no excuse for
Right.
this. And so I think that's the way I think we need to look at it. It's just I would take the gloves off and say, look, we can complain about that all we want, but if we're going to be okay with requiring 17 public meetings
Mhm.
to allow people to appeal putting affordable housing in their neighborhood,
Right.
when it's demonstrated that it's not going to be it's shown economic harm, then we asked for it. Then we should stop complaining and just own that,
Right.
or we should do something about it.
Or the inverse, every vote no or every thumbs down on the construction of affordable housing is what I say also, accepting more homelessness in the community too. So, you've got this, tension here as well, or staff shortages of nurses and EMTs and teachers because they can't afford to live there. So, society at some point has to make these links together to understand the impacts of these decisions when it comes to affordable housing
Yeah.
and construction of it. Yeah.
I think it's incumbent on us as leaders in the industry too to also make sure that we're making that case and that we're helping to put the information out there. I mean, obviously, everyone has an obligation and responsibility to consume that information and
Yeah.
get informed. But I think, and that's one of the things that we try to do is say, look, there is a consequence here, and it's a good one. And this is what you want. And this, like, in our community I live in, we had a situation where we had a lot of chronically homeless folks, and in the wintertime when it was super cold, the police were just, you know, writing them up on citations for one thing or another, just to make sure that they could spend a night in jail so they wouldn't freeze to death.
Mm.
And we went to the city and county to convince them to build a chronically homeless place, right? And we were able to just, we didn't talk about why this was a good thing to do. We didn't talk about why it's our moral obligation to do so. What we said is, look, it's going to cost you about $70,000 a year in jail costs to do what you're doing today. If we do it this way, it'll cost you about $40,000 a year.
Hmm.
And it passed, right?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes it's just
Right.
putting the emotions aside and saying, look, this is why it makes sense. And then you decide. Uh, Fortunately, that one worked.
Mm-hmm. Good business sense, good social sense, good moral sense. So it hits all the check boxes.
Yeah.
Well, I have been talking with Bob Simpson, the founder of Simpson Impact Strategies and the CEO of the Multifamily Impact Council. Thank you, Bob. It has been an honor to have you here and champion affordable housing and where we need to head from here.
Thank you so much, Katie. I love listening to your podcast, and thank you for all you do to get the word out about this fascinating topic.
Thanks for listening to ChangeMakers with Katie Gore. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.